It's a mind-blowing thought.
No.
That 1,500 people, here's the math.
Okay.
1,500 people share the gospel with 4 people.
Yes.
Okay?
That's 6,000 people.
6,000 people. If 3% of 6,000 people receive Christ and join us in the journey to share the gospel with 4 people, we will reach the entire adult population in Alaska in 22 years.
So like cumulative.
That's correct.
So you have to add the 3%.
We're not asking for people to pray for the same names. That we're saying we're going to tell every Alaskan the gospel. So you have this year, here's your 4 people. Next year, here's your 4 people. Or pick 4 people. I'll start. One of the things that I liked was that innovation is not just a creative new idea. You know, everybody has a creative new idea. I get lots of people with a lot of ideas. But an innovation is the ability for you to do a creative idea, to actually innovate, change, refocus, redesign, restructure to accomplish a greater task. Obviously, we're talking about doing that ourselves. We've been discussing putting everything on the table at the church here and asking ourselves, if we could start over, or if we could do something different, what would it be? And then obviously with our church our size, it's how do we make that happen? Is that logistically possible? What would we have to change to reach Anchorage with the gospel more effectively and or meet the needs of the people as well in our church? So we normally don't want to evaluate what's comfortable because we think it worked in the past. That's hard for me. You know, a basketball coach, you think about a basketball coach, he has a play, thinks this is the play, I'm sticking that play, this always work. But it doesn't always work. The enemy changes his strategy. And I think that's what's happened at the church. You know, he's changed his strategy. He hasn't changed his methods. He's still trying to corruption and destroy families, but he's using different tools that we've got to adapt to and be ready to handle the next generation and the generations to come. And it's really even in every generation. You know, every generation is facing.
That paragraph that you were doing is whatever you do not let the rules of people stop you from following God. Mm-hmm. When He gives it to you, go with it.
Yeah, that's a tough one. I mean, let's just face it. That's hard. How many churches do we see around our community that are just flat out unwilling to take that risk? I mean, I would say that's the vast majority of churches, period. You know, we're not going to change this. Somebody is going to be upset. We're going to lose this person, that person. And so they're literally paralyzed. And I will tell you, that's the hardest thing here. That's everywhere, you know. And what do you got to do? In order to make it happen, somebody's got to, it's kind of funny, we're talking about capturing this Sunday, but you're going to have to, you got to sell it. You know, you're going to have to say, this is what we're doing. Now, biblically speaking, those guys didn't care. They just did it. You know, God moved on their hearts, and this is what we're doing. You either follow us or you don't. Which is a little harsh, but the reality is it is God-driven versus emotional or connection. Tony, that's really good. What else? What do we foresee? Some of the problems or situations that we have that we might want to say, hey, we need to think outside the box. We need to start thinking about this.
Service times.
Alex dropped service times. Okay, service times. What else? What are some of the traditional things that don't necessarily, it's not that they don't work, but that we could do better? So he says service times. What else?
Listen, I'll say technology, but I'm the first to say I don't really understand. But I just know young people. I mean, their whole life, they're digital natives. You know, you've never known a day without cell phones and computers, and whereas you and I grew up without computers and remember when the first cell phones came out. So if you're going to communicate to the younger generation, I don't know what that looks like. I'm not saying I know what it looks because I don't understand that world, but it's got to involve, in my opinion, this technology. At the same time, you know, I say that, and at the same time, in the back of my mind, it's like human nature doesn't change. God's nature. The only two things that don't change is human nature and God's nature.
Yeah.
So human nature doesn't change. So you still have those needs. Even a young person Why do I always look at you when I say young person?
Well, you
He's
guys gonna say, Tom, you
Yeah,
can look at
I've seen
everybody on this side of the room because we're all younger than you.
He's the youngest in the room.
But
You
the
were the
same-
principal of my life.
The same basic emotional and spiritual needs that a person has always had, young people today still have.
Yeah.
So they still have a need to be loved and accepted and feel like they belong and are competent in various areas. But how do you accomplish that through technology? I don't know. I mean, I know what their needs are. That doesn't change. I know what
Yeah.
God's nature is. That doesn't change.
So the innovation we have to
That's
have
the innovation
is
of
between
how
the
to-
two. How do we use technology to our advantage
And
to
that I
get
don't.
people into a personal relationship? Because it's going to be a face-on-face. You know, it's got to be a touch. You know, the heart-on-heart is where it's going to happen. You know, true. What else in the book stood out? I mean, that's right off the bat. Obviously, there's lots of good stuff in here, so I'm gonna let you guys speak.
I think one thing that stuck out to me is like thinking of things that people don't know that they want, but like thinking, okay, what's something that they could have? For example, he was saying in the 1980s, like General Motors, Walmart, things like that, those were the biggest companies. Well, no one knew about like Amazon or Facebook. Those things didn't exist, but people want them. And so just thinking about what are things that could be beneficial that we might not see right now that could potentially be the future.
Yeah.
I think it was good.
So let's talk about that. With that, follow up on that while everybody else is thinking about what they're going to say about the chapter. What in your mind in the next 20 years do you think church is going to look like?
Subscription based, for profit.
That's how it'll happen. If you're not charging something, they won't want to come. Like, it must be worthless. That's a free app.
That is an idea that I have.
Good. Pay per service.
Or you can
Oh,
use
man.
what's a
That's a tough one, right?
Right.
It's hard. I think in some ways it depends on how our country goes.
Well, it's tough too because 30 years ago there were things that happened in church that still happen today. So it's easy to think 30 years from now it'll all be different. It probably won't be because it's still people sitting in pews or chairs. There's lights. The lights just look different, but they're still there. The message is the same. The preacher is still bold and confident. There's a lot of things that are still similar, but there are a lot of things that have innovated and changed too. So I think thinking about what it'll look like later on will include a lot of things that still exist.
I think COVID kind of introduced a whole new realm of like online church and like streaming and your communities online. So maybe that could be a possibility. Maybe.
So our mission is to create Christ-centered world changers. We believe that Christ-centered world changers change their world, they change their community, and ultimately they will change the state. Because we know that we have to fight corruption. We know that we have to fight in our own life, the world. And so we want to share the gospel. And so when we say Christ-centered world changers, we mean people that are fully devoted to Christ. Christ is the center of every decision they make. And world changer meaning that they see their neighbor and they love them. Because without love, the church is lost. And we need to become a church who loves its neighbor in more ways than just showing compassion or tolerance, but actually to be one who engages where they are and how we can help them be guided to the truth of the gospel.